Toni Collette. When discussing Oscar snubs in recent history, Toni Collette's performance in Hereditary stands as one of the most baffling omissions. In Ari Aster's 2018 psychological horror, Collette played Annie Graham, a mother unraveling under the weight of unimaginable grief and inherited trauma. Her performance wasn't just powerful, it was a masterclass in emotional range, shifting seamlessly between raw sorrow, manic desperation, and unrelenting fury. The film opens with the death of Annie's mother, setting a tone of unease and psychological tension. Collette immediately establishes Annie as emotionally distanced but deeply complex, someone repressing deep familial resentments. As the narrative unfolds and tragedy escalates, with the shocking death of her daughter Charlie, Colette's performance expands. The dinner table scene that follows is perhaps the most cited example of her emotional precision. Her monologue oscillates between grief, rage, and guilt without ever tipping into melodrama. She delivers each line with blistering authenticity, commanding silence from the audience with her escalating anguish. Colette's use of physicality in the role is equally critical. Her body responds to trauma in real time, collapsing, contorting, and shaking with grief. She's not just crying on screen, she's embodying devastation. Her breakdowns don't feel performed, they feel witnessed. In a genre often dismissed by awards bodies, her commitment to authenticity cut through the supernatural trappings. Even when the film enters occult horror territory, Collette never lets go of emotional grounding. Her terror is deeply human, and the fear she conveys doesn't stem from demons. It comes from a mother realizing she's helpless against the horrors closing in on her family. Critics widely praised her work. Publications like The New Yorker, Rolling Stone, and The Atlantic singled her out for turning what could have been a standard genre role into a performance worthy of awards. In particular, Colette's ability to mine the horror of maternal responsibility and emotional repression was highlighted as both horrifying and deeply moving. Reviewers consistently noted how she elevated the film into art house territory. Despite near-universal critical acclaim, Collette received no Oscar nomination. The Academy has a long-standing bias against horror as a genre, often excluding it from major categories unless it is presented as prestige drama. This same bias likely explains the omission, despite Collette receiving nominations from the Gotham Awards, Critics' Choice Awards, and winning Best Actress from the International Cinephile Society. Her performance in Hereditary was the kind that doesn't just define a film, it defines a genre era. Few horror performances are etched into cultural memory the way hers is. Yet when Oscar morning arrived, her name was glaringly absent from the Best Actress list.
Sorry for stopping your video, but you really should subscribe.
Rosamund Pike. Rosamund Pike's performance in Gone Girl was a masterclass in controlled manipulation, icy detachment, and calculated rage. Yet the Oscars stopped short of rewarding her with a win. Adapted from Gillian Flynn's best-selling novel, the 2014 David Fincher film gave Pike the role of Amy Dunne, a woman who fakes her disappearance to frame her husband for murder. What Pike delivered wasn't just a villain or antihero, it was a fully dimensional portrayal of societal projection, media distortion, and gender performance. Amy Dunne is not a character who reveals her true self easily, and that's exactly what made Pike's performance so extraordinary. For the first third of the film, Pike plays the image of the missing wife, soft-spoken, charming, and flawless, as told through her diary entries. Pike gives Amy just enough vulnerability to make the audience believe her version of events. But once the story pivots and we see the reality behind her plan, Pike transforms. She doesn't just shift gears, she unleashes a version of Amy that is cold, brilliant, and terrifyingly methodical. The shift is delivered with surgical precision. Pike's voiceover during the cool girl monologue stands as one of the most iconic moments in modern cinema. In it, she dissects how women contort themselves to fit male desires. Pike's delivery is venomous and razor-sharp, every word soaked in disdain. She speaks directly to the societal lie of female likability, and in doing so, reclaims narrative authority. That internalized critique is not just in the writing, it's how Pike chooses to perform it, not as a rant, but as a confession that chills. Throughout the film, Pike controls her body language with discipline. Her posture, gaze, and tone are calibrated depending on whom Amy is performing for. She switches between personas, the wronged wife for the media, the submissive partner for her abusive ex, the seductive homemaker for her husband, all while maintaining a core of terrifying intelligence. Pike doesn't play Amy with melodrama, she plays her with a sociopathic steadiness that makes her far more unsettling. Critics were stunned by her range. Many noted how Pike, previously known for supporting roles, suddenly demonstrated a transformative command of screen presence. She earned nominations from virtually every major body, BAFTA, Golden Globes, and the Academy. But at the Oscars, she lost to Julianne Moore for Still Alice, a performance more conventionally dramatic, centered on a character with a terminal illness. The decision reflected a broader reluctance to reward female performances that defy traditional narratives of suffering or redemption. Amy Dunne isn't a martyr or a victim, she's a manipulator who wields her intellect like a weapon. Pike's performance was too threatening, too ambiguous, too sharp-edged for the Academy to embrace. Even today, Pike's Gone Girl role remains a cultural touchstone. Amy Dunne became shorthand for the critique of gender performance and media sensationalism. Ellen Burstyn's performance in Requiem for a Dream is widely regarded as one of the most harrowing portrayals of addiction ever captured on film, and its failure to earn her the Best Actress Oscar is still still considered one of the most glaring Academy oversights. In Darren Aronofsky's 2000 psychological drama, Burstyn plays Sara Goldfarb, an aging widow whose quiet, solitary life spirals into delusion and psychosis after becoming addicted to amphetamines. Her descent isn't explosive, it's gradual, insidious, and utterly devastating. Burstyn's portrayal is grounded in deep humanity. Sara begins the film as a lonely woman clinging to the hope of appearing on television, finding purpose in the possibility of being somebody. When she receives a call from a casting agency, it gives her life meaning, even though the offer is clearly a scam. Her obsession with fitting into her red dress leads her to diet pills prescribed by an indifferent doctor, and from there, she slowly loses her grip on reality. Burstyn never plays Sara as pitiful. Instead, she imbues her with dignity, showing how ordinary aspirations can morph into dangerous obsessions. What makes her performance so devastating is its realism. Burstyn portrays every stage of Sara's mental collapse with subtle but horrifying precision. At first, her facial expressions are filled with restrained optimism and nervous excitement. As the pills begin to take over, her speech quickens, her gestures become erratic, and her eyes lose focus. By the time hallucinations begin, Burstyn is unrecognizable, not just in appearance, but in presence. Her body stiffens, her voice slips into a slurry of confused monologues, and her mind unravels before the audience's eyes. In one of the film's most haunting scenes, Sara sits in front of her refrigerator, which bursts to life in a hallucinatory nightmare. Burstyn's reaction is one of pure terror, not exaggerated but internalized. She doesn't scream, she shudders, her body trembling in fear and disorientation. This commitment to portraying mental deterioration with such authenticity is rare. Burstyn understood that the horror in Sara's story came not from external monsters but from the breakdown of the self. Despite the film's disturbing content and nonlinear structure, Burstyn's performance became the emotional anchor. Critics lauded her as the heart of the film, praising her willingness to fully inhabit the character's suffering without compromise. She was nominated for Best Actress at the Academy Awards, but lost to Julia Roberts for Erin Brockovich, a performance that, while strong, lacked the raw, boundary-pushing depth Burstyn delivered. The decision was widely criticized. Many argued that the Academy chose to honor a feel-good, empowering narrative over one that exposed the bleak, uncomfortable truths of addiction and loneliness. Burstyn's loss highlighted how the Oscars often reward comfort and inspiration over discomfort and reality, particularly when the discomfort comes from a female character enduring mental illness and societal neglect. Angela Bassett. Angela Bassett's performance as Tina Turner in What's Love Got to Do with It is one of the most electrifying and emotionally committed portrayals ever brought to screen, and her loss at the 1994 Oscars still stands as a pivotal moment of recognition denied. Playing a real-life legend is always a daunting task, but Bassett did more than mimic Turner. She embodied her spirit, her pain, and her resilience, delivering a performance that was both physically demanding and emotionally explosive. The role required Bassett to chart Tina Turner's journey from timid, church-going anime bullock to the powerhouse performer who would eventually reclaim her life and career. From the earliest scenes, Bassett exudes a quiet vulnerability. Her anime is soft-spoken and naive, drawn into Ike Turner's orbit with wide-eyed admiration. But as the relationship evolves into one of violence, control, and psychological manipulation, Bassett transforms. Her portrayal is a study in survival, not just of the body, but of identity. The physicality Bassett brought to the role is unmistakable. She trained extensively to replicate Turner's energetic, high-intensity stage presence. Her dance movements were ferocious, her stage persona magnetic. But it wasn't the musical numbers alone that defined the performance. It was the brutal, emotional interior behind the glamour. The scenes of domestic abuse are wrenching, and Bassett's expressions of terror, defiance, and heartbreak are visceral. She doesn't flinch from the horror of Tina's reality. Instead, she shows the toll it takes on a woman fighting to preserve her sense of self. One of the most powerful scenes comes when Tina finally decides to leave Ike. Bloodied and exhausted, she stumbles into a hotel, desperate and broke, declaring she only has her name. Bassett's delivery in that moment is shattering. She doesn't play Tina as a victim asking for pity. She plays her as a survivor demanding dignity. The emotional weight Bassett carries throughout the film culminates in that quiet declaration of autonomy, making it one of the most memorable exits in film history. Critics overwhelmingly praised Bassett's work. She won the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy and received nominations from nearly every major award body. Yet, at the Oscars, she lost to Holly Hunter for The Piano. While Hunter's performance was subtle and critically respected, many felt it lacked the emotional breadth, intensity, and cultural impact of Bassett's portrayal. The decision was viewed by many as emblematic of the Academy's resistance to awarding black actresses, especially for roles rooted in black pain, power, and perseverance. Bassett's loss remains a flashpoint in conversations about Oscar bias. Her performance was not only technically outstanding, but it had enormous cultural relevance. Tina Turner's story resonated with survivors of abuse, women of color, and anyone who had to reclaim their life from oppression. Bassett honored that story with an intensity that few could match. 3 decades later, Angela Bassett's performance in What's Love Got to Do with It is still hailed as iconic. It should have won the Oscar. Glenn Close. Glenn Close's portrayal of Alex Forrest in Fatal Attraction remains one of the most iconic and controversial performances in film history. Yet despite its cultural impact and extraordinary execution, Close walked away from the 1988 Oscars without the Best Actress statue. Her work in the film is a masterclass in psychological nuance, exploring female rage, obsession, and mental deterioration with disturbing clarity. What could have been a one-dimensional villain role became, in Close's Close's Hands, a deeply tragic and unsettling portrait of emotional instability. Fatal Attraction tells the story of a brief extramarital affair that spirals into obsession and violence. As Alex, Close delivers a performance that refuses to be simplified. She never plays the character as merely crazy or evil. Instead, she reveals layer by layer how abandonment, vulnerability, and untreated mental illness can create a volatile emotional storm. The brilliance of her portrayal lies in her ability to make the audience feel conflicting emotions, fear, pity, and even empathy. In the early stages of the film, Close's Alex is charismatic and confident, exuding a mature allure that draws Michael Douglas's character into the affair. But as she begins to sense she's being discarded, her emotional instability surfaces. Close doesn't overplay it, her descent is calculated and believable. Small changes in tone, posture, and facial expression mark the progression of her unraveling. She plays Alex not as a monster, but as a woman who cannot tolerate rejection and who clings to intimacy like a lifeline. The infamous "I'm not going to be ignored" scene is a turning point. Close's delivery is chilling not because it's loud or dramatic, but because it's so grounded in psychological truth. Her voice trembles with indignation and desperation, not hysteria. The audience sees a woman whose sense of self is collapsing. Later, in the bathtub scene, her expression before the attack is almost blank, devoid of life, a quiet visual of psychological ruin. These moments were never overacted. They were studied, precise, and human. Close's dedication to authenticity extended beyond the script. She consulted with psychiatrists to understand borderline personality disorder and advocated for a more psychologically accurate ending, one where Alex dies by suicide rather than being murdered. Though the studio eventually changed it for a more sensational finale, Close's preparation and empathy shaped every frame of her performance. The Academy ultimately awarded Cher for Moonstruck, a romantic comedy performance filled with charm and heart. While Cher's turn was celebrated, many critics felt Close's work was far more demanding and enduring. The loss highlighted the Academy's discomfort with recognizing female characters who express rage and instability, especially when not softened by redemption. Glenn Close's Alex Forrest has since become an enduring figure in popular culture, a symbol both of dangerous obsession and misunderstood mental illness. The performance is often cited in discussions about female villains, but to label it as just villainy is reductive. Close created a character so compelling, she altered the cultural conversation around infidelity, gender, and sanity. Carey Mulligan. Carey Mulligan's performance in Promising Young Woman is one of the most searing, genre-defying pieces of acting in recent memory, and the Academy's decision not to reward it speaks volumes about discomfort with narratives of female anger, trauma, and revenge that don't conform to traditional storytelling structures. Directed by Emerald Fennell, the 2020 film cast Mulligan as Cassie Thomas, a former medical student haunted by the sexual assault and subsequent suicide of her best friend. Mulligan's portrayal isn't designed to comfort, it's meant to confront. Cassie is introduced as a woman leading a double life. By day, she's disaffected and emotionally withdrawn, still living at home and drifting through a life she once had full control over. By night, she frequents bars and pretends to be intoxicated, luring predatory men into revealing their true intentions. Mulligan plays both sides of Cassie with unflinching precision. Her stillness, her sardonic delivery, and her carefully timed expressions create a character who is always in control of the room, even when she's at her most emotionally fragile. One of the strengths of Mulligan's performance is how she uses silence as power. Cassie doesn't explode with rage, she simmers. Her conversations are marked by long pauses and direct eye contact, often making the men around her squirm. Mulligan weaponizes discomfort. She turns what could have been a stereotypical Avenger role into something deeply unsettling, a woman whose trauma has frozen her life and warped her sense of justice. The performance demands attention not through theatrics, but through sharp emotional control. When Cassie meets Ryan, played by Bo Burnham, Mulligan shifts gears. Her performance softens, shows glimmers of vulnerability, and allows Cassie brief moments of hope. But that hope is laced with tension, as viewers know the pain and obsession Cassie carries. Mulligan plays these moments with just enough lightness to make the eventual emotional collapse all the more brutal. When Cassie's revenge arc culminates in her final confrontation, Mulligan delivers her lines with icy calm, making the horror of the scene even more terrifying. Mulligan received a Best Actress Oscar nomination, and for a time, she appeared to be the frontrunner. Critics praised her for subverting expectations, for refusing to make Cassie likable, and for embodying a rage that felt authentic without descending into caricature. However, the Oscar ultimately went to Frances McDormand for Nomadland, a performance that, while subtle and affecting, was far more traditional in tone and theme. The contrast was clear. McDormand's character suffered quietly, while Mulligan's raged methodically. The loss sparked debates about what kinds of female performances are deemed award-worthy. Mulligan didn't play a victim or a heroine. She played someone complicated, morally ambiguous, and psychologically scarred. Her performance dared audiences to sit with discomfort and denied them neat resolution. If you're thinking about subscribing, now's the time. I'm about to post a ton here. Thanks. Back to it. Viola Davis. Viola Davis's portrayal of Aibileen Clark in The Help was a quiet triumph of emotional precision and understated power. Yet despite the role's cultural resonance and Davis's masterful execution, she was passed over for the Best Actress Oscar in 2012. In a film that dramatized the lives of black domestic workers in 1960s Mississippi, Davis served as the emotional center. Her performance gave voice to generations of silenced women, even as the film itself drew criticism for centering white perspectives. Aibileen is a character worn down by years of injustice justice, grief, and erasure. Her role as a maid caring for white children while mourning the death of her own son is loaded with pain, but Davis never plays her as pitiable. Instead, she layers Aibileen with quiet dignity, creating a woman who has learned to survive by masking her sorrow with poise. Davis doesn't need grand monologues or dramatic breakdowns to make her point. Every look, pause, and softened line communicates volumes. Much of Aibileen's power comes through restraint. Davis uses silence as a form of resistance. Her calm exterior is often contrasted against the cruelty and ignorance of the white families she works for. The pain in her eyes as she comforts a child she knows will grow into another complicit adult is devastating. In one of the film's most famous lines, "You is kind, you is smart, you is important," Davis delivers the words with such tenderness and sadness that it becomes clear she's not just affirming the child, but trying to preserve her own sense of worth. The final confrontation between Aibileen and Hilly Holbrook is a standout moment. Davis's controlled rage is palpable. She doesn't yell, she doesn't plead. She speaks with clarity and finality, delivering a blow not with volume, but with truth. The way Davis holds her ground in that scene shows how fully she understood the character's emotional architecture. Aibileen isn't just enduring racism, she's resisting it in the only ways society allows her. Davis received an Oscar nomination for Best Actress, and many considered her the frontrunner, but the Academy gave the award to Meryl Streep for The Iron Lady. While Streep's portrayal of Margaret Thatcher was technically impressive, critics noted that Davis's performance carried more emotional weight and societal relevance. The decision was met with disappointment and frustration, especially among viewers who saw The Help as an opportunity to finally reward Davis's immense talent in a leading role. It also reignited discussions about how the Academy evaluates performances by black women. Davis herself later reflected that she regretted making The Help, pointing out that the story ultimately prioritized white redemption over black experience. Still, her performance stood above the limitations of the script, offering a portrayal so rich in humanity that it transcended the film's flaws. Margot Robbie. Margot Robbie's performance in Tonya was a transformative, unflinching portrayal of one of the most controversial figures in sports history, and her loss at the 2018 Oscars stands as yet another example of the Academy hesitating to reward bold, unconventional female performances. In playing Tonya Harding, Robbie discarded vanity, embraced volatility, and delivered a performance that was as emotionally raw as it was physically demanding. Robbie not only starred in the film, she also produced it, pushing the project forward despite industry hesitation. Her commitment to the role is evident in every frame. She trained rigorously for months to replicate Harding's unique skating style and aggressive athleticism. While CGI helped with some of the most difficult jumps, the emotional weight behind the athletic scenes was all Robbie. She captured not just the motion of skating, but the feeling of desperation, drive, and determination that defined Harding's life. Tonya's story is one of systemic abuse, poverty, and public vilification. Robbie doesn't ask for sympathy, but she insists on complexity. Her performance is layered with contradictions. Tonya is brash but insecure, tough but wounded, self-sabotaging, yet striving for greatness. Robbie makes her human, refusing to turn her into either a victim or a villain. The scenes between Tonya and her abusive mother Lavona, played by Allison Janney, are particularly striking. Robbie shows how Tonya's need for approval is buried beneath a thick shell of anger, pride, and survival instinct. In a film that breaks the fourth wall and oscillates between dark comedy and tragedy, Robbie holds the center. Her emotional range is on full display. One moment, she's smashing a mirror in rage. The next, she's crying mid-makeup in one of the film's most iconic scenes. As Tonya prepares for a performance, staring at herself in the mirror, she forces a smile through tears. It's a gut-wrenching depiction of a woman forced to perform happiness in the face of humiliation. Critics applauded Robbie's ability to embody Harding without parody. She resisted turning the role into caricature, instead portraying a woman shaped by circumstance, ambition, and a constant fight for recognition. The performance earned her an Oscar nomination for Best Actress, alongside a win for Janney in Supporting Actress. But the Oscar ultimately went to Frances McDormand for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, a performance praised for its blunt strength. Harding's story, and by extension Robbie's portrayal, didn't offer redemption or neat closure. It was a declaration of artistic range and fearlessness. She took a reviled figure and forced audiences to see her anew, bruised, flawed, and undeniably real. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and subscribe. I've got a lot more content coming. Thanks for watching.